All right, so the motor's back out of the car because I forgot to install the rear main seal before I put the flywheel on. So that really sucks. Motor is completely back out, got it out in about a little over an hour. I disconnect all the fuel lines, take the whole manifold back off, AC, power steering, engine mounts, all the bell housing bolts, which are the most annoying part. There's about 8 of them that you can see right around there. And yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and get this pressure plate off along with this throwout bearing, clutch, and flywheel, and then get the rear main seal installed. So the rear main seal is in, and what I used to get it in was this Company 23 tool, and they give you 4 17mm bolts, and you thread them right in on those top 2 and the bottom 2, and tighten them down evenly, and it'll perfectly install your rear main seal. So next, I installed this cylinder 4 cooling mod. This is a really good modification you can do, which taps into your return heater hose, and it feeds extra coolant into cylinder 4 to keep it super cooled down and make sure that doesn't overheat, because that is the one that's the most prone to overheating. So there's a little T-fitting. Just cut the hose a little shorter from this. It'll go up onto the bottom part, and then this will go onto that black hose, the lower one, and then it'll go into your lower heater hose in the car. And then I also got the throwout bearing off of the pressure plate. This kind of, you push this in and then you're able to push that off. So just use a screwdriver to hold it on there and kind of pry the throwout bearing off, and then throw it back on down there on the bell housing. It's kind of bad lighting, but throw that back down on there, and then the clutch fork goes in there and the slide pin goes back in. All right, the motor's back in, and I pretty much have everything put in except for the alternator, turbo, intercooler, intake, battery, and the radiator. But I'm just gonna wait until the turbo gets here tomorrow. I have a stock one coming, since the one that I sent in for a rebuild is taking a super long time. So yeah, I also went ahead and wrapped up this alternator wire, since I pulled out the wires out of the stock one, so I had to get this new connector. Just wrapped it in electrical tape just so it looks somewhat decent. And yeah, I'll get back to you guys once the turbo gets here. All right, so I got the turbo, got it installed. I had to put the drain hose on the bottom of it. It didn't come with that, and I thought I didn't have my banjo bolt for the oil line, but I did. It was laying over there. So that's lucky. And yeah, this is just a VF48 stock turbo. I'm just gonna run this so I can get some miles on the motor, and then once the 20G gets back, then we can make some power. All right, so the fuel lines are done, throttle body's on, the whole AOS system is on, the turbo's in, everything's good to go, and now I'm just gonna start building oil pressure, and then I'll have to put the spark plugs and coil packs in, and then we can get the first start.
Good.
Alright guys, so last night my phone was dead pretty much the whole night, so I wasn't able to get any footage at all. But the first start went super well. We drained the oil after about 20-30 seconds of idling to get all that assembly lube and all the stuff inside the motor out from them manufacturing it. And then took it for about a 30-mile drive and realized that the drain hose on the stock turbo that I'm running for now was loose, so it was just burning off a shit ton of oil. So I had to pull the turbo back out, and I'm gonna fix that. right, guys, so it's been a few days and I haven't really filmed anything at all. And the reason for that is I've had just a few things that have kind of worried me going into this, and I just wanted to take a little bit of time away from filming and all that and just focus on getting everything 100% dialed. So the first issue we had was I went to crank the car to build oil pressure, and it just sounded like the starter wasn't lining up with the flywheel at all whatsoever. So we pulled the starter out like 3 or 4 different times, tested it a bunch, made sure the little spring that pushes it out to engage with the flywheel was actually working, and it was. So we put it back in, and it just sounded like the starter was spinning, and it did not sound like a car cranking over how it should have sounded at all. But ended up building oil pressure just fine. And yeah, that was our first issue. And then the second issue was I overheated on the highway. I thought my thermostat was bad. We pulled it out, tested it, put it in boiling water, and it opened and everything. And it ended up being that I just didn't bleed the coolant system well enough. All right, guys, so the actual turbo that I'm going to be running is here. It's a 20G that was rebuilt by Hill Country Forced Induction in New Mexico. And they gave it a fresh front housing, completely rebuilt the CHRA, and I'm pretty sure they cleaned the wheels or put new wheels on it. I'm not 100% sure, but they got it super cleaned up, ready to go on the car. Should be able to make around 400 wheel horsepower on E85. I want to go bigger at some point, but this would be a good starting point. And yeah, let's get that put in. I'm just waiting on the whole engine to cool down right now because the turbo and downpipe are extremely hot. So I'm just going to give it a second and then we'll start yanking everything out. All right, guys, so the turbo is in. The oil feed line's connected. I got all the coolant hoses that go onto the side attached to it, along with the wastegate. And the turbo inlet is connected, and it's all bolted down to the up pipe. And now I'm just working on getting the down pipe and the wideband sensor installed back into the down pipe. And then I'm going to be heading over to my buddy's shop to clean those injectors, because those injectors have never been cleaned, and I bought them off Facebook Marketplace. So I just want to make sure they're 100% good to go and rule that out, because I was kind of having a little fuel stumble, a little issue. And I have a fuel stumble fix, which is the fuel pressure regulator. So it shouldn't be doing that. So hopefully with this turbo and after cleaning the injectors, that'll be completely gone. All right, guys, so we're currently having an issue. The car's at like 2,000, maybe 2,500 miles now on the new motor, and we're having an issue while tuning with the GR stumble. So I decided to get upgraded fuel rails and lines, and I took the 15 amp fuse out of the fuse box, let the car idle till it died, and now all the fuel pressure's out. So now I'm going to start getting the intercooler, some of the AOS hoses, and the coolant upper reservoir, and some of the TGV bolts out, and disconnect the fuel lines from there and take off the intake. And then we can start getting the new fuel rails on and get everything plumbed up. All right, the intake manifold, wiring harness, and fuel lines are all out. That was a bitch to do, but got it out and got to clean some of the stuff underneath there that had leaked in the past. So that was good. And now I'm going to start getting the fuel lines off that manifold and get the new fuel rails hooked up. All right, guys, so the pair and rails are bolted down to the manifold. They bolt down to the TGVs, actually. They're just two 12 mils on either side, and the injectors go in here. I just positioned the injectors downwards instead of sideways. It just fits better with these rails. But yeah, I'm going to try and get this test fit in there with some of the lines and everything, get some of the lines plumbed up, and try and get this done before I have to go to work. All right, so I looked at Perrin's V2 fuel rails online, and in the diagram, it shows that the top fitting is for the return and the bottom fittings for the feed. So I'm assuming, these are the V1s, but I'm assuming they're the same design, just older. So I'm hoping this will all work. It should. Some people run parallel setups, and some people run, series setups. And I'm going to be running a parallel setup, which means a line goes from the return on either side to a T-fitting, which I've set up here. And then this T-fitting, there will be one line that goes to the return on the fuel pressure regulator. And then the bottom two will be the feed, and those will be going to the feed line. So I think that's how these are supposed to get set up. Don't quote me on it, but this should work. All right, so I have all the feed and return lines hooked up to the manifold. This one is going to be our return line. This one's going to be the feed line, and they're going to wrap around the PCV hose right here in the engine bay. They're going to go underneath that and then up through here on the intake manifold. And then the return will be going to the ethanol sensor, which feeds into the fuel pressure regulator and then back to the tank. And the feed will hook up right to here with this fuel damper on it. All right, so the wiring harness is getting bolted down to the manifold now. I went ahead and got a new connector for the right-hand exhaust cam sensor because I've been having a code for it, but it's not affecting the car's performance at all in any way. So hopefully that makes the code go away. If it doesn't, I'm honestly just gonna bring it to Sioux Falls or Rapid and just see if the dealership can even diagnose it, because I'd like to get the check engine light gone. There's no reason it should have a check engine light. So I'm gonna get this thrown on and try and get all the whole wiring harness sorted throughout the engine bay, and then we'll go from there. All right, guys, so I'm still in the process of getting the wiring harness all laid out throughout the engine bay, but I did realize that these injector connectors here are not going to work facing straight because they're going to hit on this AVCS solenoid and the oil control valve. So you're going to have to put them sideways just like the stock lines are. So that's kind of annoying just for getting them on and off and ease of access, but not a big deal. And yeah, I'm just going to keep routing everything. It's kind of annoying trying to, with all this clutter over here, but I'll get it done here in the next 30 minutes to an hour, hopefully. So I'm getting to the point where it's almost done, but I just wanted to say, if you are going to install these parent fuel rails, swap the sides so that the fittings are on the front of the intake manifold, because it is a huge pain in the ass having them on the back and trying to route fuel lines by all those lines that are already back there. Look how cluttered this is. There's so much shit back here, and I had to route everything over and over just to make it right because I did not want to pull that intake manifold back off and have to redo the entire wiring harness. So it was kind of part me being lazy, but I also just didn't want to pull that off again. It's a huge pain in the ass, and I would rather just have it set up like this since it's already like this. I would have to take the rails back out, the injectors back out, flip everything around. Just a huge pain in the ass. So I decided I'm going to keep the feed lines and return lines on the back side of the manifold, which kind of keeps them out of the way, but it's also super cluttered back there. So that's just kind of something annoying about these parent fuel rails if you have them flipped sides. I didn't really think about that before I put the manifold in, which I should have, but that's a mistake on my part, so whatever. But it's just about done, and then we can go for the first start with the new fuel rails and everything, make sure there's no leaks, and hopefully everything will be good. All right, so I'm at the point now where everything fuel related is hooked up and connected to something and clamped down. So what I'm gonna do is I put the 15 amp fuse back in the fuse box that powers the fuel pump. So I'm gonna prime the fuel pump a few times and make sure that there's no leaks, get the fuel pressure built before I start putting everything back together, just in case there is something that I need to tighten more or get a different clamp for or something like that. We're all good. There's no leaks now. There was a little tiny leak on this fuel rail right over here on the front injector because the bolt that was holding it down just was not tight enough. So I got a longer bolt that wasn't stripping out because the old one I was using was really short and it just kept stripping out the more you tightened it. So I went to Menards and got a longer bolt, and it's good to go now. So I'm just going to throw the intercooler on. I already have the intake on, bolt down the bypass valve, and it should be ready to start. everything's good to go. There's no leaks. Sounding amazing. That's hype. Alright, so now it's idled down a little bit. I have the heat on full blast, recirculating in there so that the coolant can bleed all the way through the system, get any air bubbles out that possibly could have gotten in there from taking off the upper reservoir. So we'll let it get up to operating temp and then should be good to go drive it. Alright guys, so the coolant is all burped, everything's good to go. I checked everywhere for leaks. The fuel system is ready to make some power. So I'm hyped for that. Everything is connected. We're good to go. That's probably going to be it for this video. I have an external wastegate and an up pipe coming for the car tomorrow or Friday. So whenever that gets here, I'll probably shoot another video on installing that. But thank you guys for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed.